11 hours. That's how long an 18-year-old vanished inside a cabin where security cameras recorded only one other person entering. When the cabin steward lifted the mattress, they didn't just discover what had happened to Anna Kepner, they uncovered a silence her family has been trying to protect ever since. The FBI says the cause was asphyxiation. Her family insists she was found in perfect condition. But only one of those statements can be true. And by the end of this video, you'll hear the one sentence the teen suspect told investigators, a sentence that made everyone in the room go cold. The closed room. When the door of cabin 9481 opened on the morning of November 7, the housekeeping staff entered with a routine assignment. Change the linens, empty the trash, and check the standard items in the room. But only minutes later, that ordinary routine shifted into something no one on the carnival horizon could have anticipated. As the staff member lifted the mattress to replace the bedding, they discovered something that froze the entire hallway on Deck 9. In the narrow space between the bed frame and the floor lay the unmoving form of 18-year-old Anna Kepner, clearly no longer alive. A heavy silence filled the small cabin. Cabin 9481 follows the typical layout. Bed against the left wall, a vanity facing the door, and a closet to the right. The space beneath the bed, usually just large enough for a suitcase, had become a place where the truth remained hidden for many hours. The first question investigators asked was simple yet troubling. How could someone in that condition remain unseen, even though her family reported searching for her throughout the night? Just outside the cabin, the hallway camera on Deck 9 provided a direct angle of the corridor. According to later statements, the footage showed only one young male leaving the room during the critical time frame. No footage has been released showing Anna walking out or returning after she was last seen on the night of November 6. There were also no recorded images of any search efforts by the family during the night, an absence that raised further questions within the community following the case. From the moment the staff member made the discovery, Deck 9 came to a standstill. The ship, still in the middle of its journey, instantly became a protected scene. Onboard security sealed off the area, notified the captain, and contacted the relevant authorities. All camera data, room entry logs, and passenger lists for the deck were collected for further review. Inside the confined space of a cruise ship cabin, a chain of unanswered questions began to unfold, and almost none of them had immediate explanations. From the instant the mattress was lifted, the mystery surrounding Anna's final 12 hours began, setting the stage for an investigation that would follow the ship far beyond the ocean. At 2200 on the night of November 6, Anna Kepner was last confirmed to be with her family inside cabin 9481 on Deck 9. According to the family's account, the evening was ordinary. Time spent preparing for bed, discussing the next day's port activities, and settling in after a long day on the ship. Around this time, the hallway outside the cabin remained quiet, with the Deck 9 camera recording normal passenger movement. What the camera did not record was Anna leaving the cabin after 2200, an omission that would later become one of the central questions of the investigation. Between 2030 and 2300, family members stated that they believed Anna had gone to sleep. No unusual sounds were reported from the room, and there is no available footage of her walking into the hallway. The camera did, however, a young male exiting the cabin shortly before midnight. This would later be one of the only confirmed movements linked to cabin 9481 during the night. From 100 to 0650, the Carnival Horizon sailed through calm waters. During this period, there were no documented calls to guest services, no security alerts, and no reports that Anna was missing. The hallway camera continued its usual motion-triggered recordings, but did not capture any further activity from the cabin. If any search efforts took place during these hours, they were not recorded by the hallway camera. At 07:30, family members reported waking up and noticing that Anna was not in her bed. They later stated they believed she may have gone to breakfast early or stepped out briefly, though she was not captured on camera. No report of a missing passenger was made at this time. Between 0800 and 1000, the ship's daily activities resumed, passengers moved through the hallways, breakfast service began, and housekeeping staff prepared for scheduled cabin cleanings. The camera logs show typical morning traffic, but once again, no footage of Anna appears. At 1100, a housekeeping staff member arrived at cabin 9481 for routine service. They entered, began changing linens, and organizing the room. At 11:17, while lifting the mattress to replace the bedding, they made the discovery that would halt operations on Deck 90. Anna was found beneath the bed, unresponsive. By 11:17, the quiet timeline of the night had ended, replaced by a series of urgent questions that investigators were trying to unravel. When investigators began piecing together the final hours inside cabin 9481, one detail immediately shaped the direction of their timeline on the night of November 6. Only two individuals were confirmed to be inside the cabin, Anna Kepner and her stepbrother. There were no verified reports of other visitors, and hallway camera footage on Deck 9 did not capture additional people entering or exiting the room during the critical window of time. This limited set of occupants narrowed the scope of inquiry and raised important questions about what may have occurred between 2200 and the late morning of November 7. When Anna was discovered the next day, staff noted several concerning observations that did not align with a simple medical emergency unfolding unnoticed. According to preliminary descriptions, Anna had dark marks along the neck area. Though no official agency has publicly confirmed the exact cause or relevance of these markings. She was wrapped in a blanket, and a life jacket had been placed on top of her. Individually, each of these elements could be interpreted in multiple ways, but together, they suggested that someone may have attempted to cover, hide, or shield her from immediate view. Because the medical examiner has not released the cause or manner of death, it is essential to approach these details cautiously and recognize that they are part of an ongoing investigation, not conclusions. The key investigative question becomes, how did Anna end up beneath the bed, wrapped and covered, when only two people were documented inside the room? If her stepbrother was the only other individual present, understanding his recollection, actions, and timeline becomes crucial. Investigators must determine when he last saw her responsive, whether he noticed anything unusual during the night, and why the cabin remained undisturbed for so many hours. Equally important is the absence of early reporting. Despite sharing a confined space, no call for assistance was made during the night, and no attempt to alert guest services was documented. This gap raises questions about the level of awareness inside the cabin, and at what point anyone realized something was wrong. The combination of limited occupants, physical details suggesting concealment, and a delayed discovery creates a sequence of events that demands careful forensic analysis. Rather than jumping to conclusions, the purpose of this investigation, and of retelling this story, is to emphasize the importance of transparency, timely reporting, and thorough inquiry whenever a young life is lost under unexplained circumstances. The moment the housekeeping staff discovered Anna beneath the bed at 11:17 a.m., the atmosphere on Deck 9 shifted instantly. What had begun as a routine morning on board the Carnival Horizon became the starting point of a sensitive and urgent investigation. Ship security, trained to handle unexpected incidents with precision, immediately sealed off cabin 9481 and the surrounding corridor. Passengers were quietly redirected, and the door to the cabin was secured to prevent anyone from entering or disturbing the environment inside. In situations like this, preserving the space exactly as it was found is crucial, as even the smallest detail can help investigators reconstruct the timeline. Security officers began documenting the scene following maritime protocols, recording temperatures, photographing the room layout, and taking note of items that seemed out of place. They collected logs showing who had accessed the cabin, reviewed motion-triggered camera activity from the Deck 9 hallway, and prepared a full incident summary for authorities on land. While cruise ship security has limited jurisdiction, their role in preserving evidence and maintaining order is essential, especially when a case involves a potential unexplained or suspicious death. As the ship continued its scheduled route toward Miami, the crew notified federal authorities in the United States. Under maritime law, when an American passenger passes away in unclear circumstances aboard an international cruise, the case becomes the responsibility of federal investigators. By the time the Carnival Horizon approached Port Miami, the FBI was already prepared to board the vessel. When the ship docked, agents boarded directly from the port gangway and proceeded to Deck 9, where the cabin remained sealed. They took possession of all materials secured by the ship's security team, including electronic logs, staff statements, passenger lists, and surveillance footage. Passengers in nearby cabins were also asked to provide any relevant information, such as unusual noises, hallway activity, or observations from the night before. The FBI's role was not to assume wrongdoing, but but to determine whether the circumstances required a criminal investigation or a different classification. The transfer of authority, from ship security maintaining the initial scene to federal agents conducting a formal inquiry, shows how seriously such cases are handled. It reinforces an important message: whenever a young person loses their life unexpectedly, every measure must be taken to ensure accuracy, transparency, and a respectful search for answers. From the moment investigators examined cabin 9481, one detail stood out immediately: the space functioned almost like a closed room. Cruise ship cabins are compact, self-contained areas with only one entrance and no secondary exits. The windows in most interior or balcony cabins cannot be opened, and there are no hidden passages or service doors connecting one cabin to another. In other words, no third person could have entered or left without being captured by the hallway camera on Deck 9, which closely monitored movement during the entire night. This closed room structure significantly narrows the investigative focus. When only 2 people were documented inside the cabin, Anna and her stepbrother, the timeline becomes more defined, and every minute must be analyzed carefully. Investigators must determine what each person was doing, when they last interacted, and whether any unusual signs were noticed, but not reported. The nature of such a confined environment highlights an essential lesson. In enclosed spaces with limited access, observable details become especially important. It encourages viewers to understand how investigators work, examining entry logs, camerage, and room conditions, to piece together events with accuracy rather than speculation. Medical records. When federal investigators boarded the ship in Miami and reviewed the preliminary findings, they addressed the central question directly. According to the FBI's early assessment, the physical indicators were consistent with asphyxiation, specifically a form caused by pressure applied to the neck area. Importantly, agents emphasized that this classification described a mechanism of loss of life, not the identity or intent of any individual involved. It is a medical conclusion, not a legal one, and further analysis by the medical examiner would still be required before determining an official manner of death. For investigators, such a finding becomes the starting point for a broader, more detailed inquiry. They must examine whether the markings were recent, whether they could have resulted from an accidental or external factor, and how they align with the timeline inside cabin 9481, a closed environment with only 2 confirmed occupants. The FBI also reviewed surveillance footage, interviewed nearby passengers, and cross-checked statements to ensure all possibilities were considered. This moment in the investigation underscores an essential understanding: how someone lost their life is only the first step. Determining why it happened, and whether any criminal responsibility exists, requires patience, forensic accuracy, and a commitment to transparency rather than assumptions. When investigators reviewed the markings on right side of Anna's neck, specialists were asked to explain whether certain types of pressure holds could create similar patterns. 2 concepts sometimes referenced in forensic analysis are the choke hold and the bar hold. These terms, used in controlled training contexts such as law enforcement or martial arts, describe different ways pressure can be applied to the neck area. In an investigative setting, discussing them is not about demonstrating technique, but about understanding the physiological effects that may appear in medical examinations. A chokehold, in forensic terminology, refers to a situation where pressure is applied around the neck in a way that affects airflow or blood flow. It can create bruising or redness on one or both sides of the neck, depending on how the pressure was distributed. Importantly, investigators do not assume intent from this pattern alone. They simply examine whether the shape, position, and depth of the marks correspond to known medical effects. A bar hold, on the other hand, involves a more concentrated form of pressure, often produced when a firm object or a forearm presses against one side of the neck. This type of compression can leave asymmetrical marks, meaning one side may show more visible discoloration than the other. When bruising appears primarily on the right side, forensic examiners may consider whether a directional force, similar in concept to a bar hold, could explain the pattern. These explanations are not conclusions. They are tools investigators use to understand what may have happened physiologically. Patterns on the skin can be influenced by countless variables: body position, timing, pre-existing marks, or even how someone was moved afterward. By comparing observed injuries with known medical mechanisms, investigators aim to reconstruct events with scientific clarity rather than speculation, ensuring a fair and accurate process for everyone involved. One of the most important steps in any forensic investigation is determining whether a person's judgment, balance, or physical awareness might have been impaired before the incident occurred. In Anna's case, early toxicology screening delivered a crucial piece of information. No alcohol, no recreational substances, and no indications of non-consensual activity were detected. These results immediately helped investigators eliminate one of the most common explanations for unexpected injuries or collapses aboard cruise ships: accidental harm due to intoxication or disorientation. Without the presence of alcohol or other altering substances in her system, the possibility that Anna simply stumbled, fainted, or experienced a disoriented fall becomes significantly less likely. Cruise ships are known for lively environments, nightlife venues, and late evening activities, which can sometimes contribute to accidental injuries. However, in this case, the toxicology findings established that Anna was fully sober during the time frame in question. This conclusion strengthens the importance of examining environmental, interpersonal, and physical factors rather than assuming a self-inflicted or accidental cause. Furthermore, the absence of foreign substances means investigators can focus more sharply on the timeline inside cabin 9481, a closed environment with no third-party access. It directs attention to the sequence of events documented through cabin access logs, hallway camera activity, and statements from the only other person confirmed to be present. When an individual is sober, the likelihood of unnoticed slips, uncoordinated movement, or impaired decision-making sharply decreases, pushing investigators toward explanations rooted in external circumstances rather than personal impairment. By ruling out intoxication or involuntary exposure, the investigation narrows in scope and becomes more precise. This process reflects a key principle in forensic science. Before determining what happened, investigators must first establish what did not happen. Eliminating incorrect assumptions allows the search for truth to proceed with clarity, accuracy, and respect for the individual whose life was lost. When examiners reviewed the subtle markings found on Anna's neck, they noted that the injuries were small in size, yet carried characteristics often seen in cases involving localized pressure. Although the marks were not extensive or visually dramatic, their shape, placement, and depth suggested that a focused force may have been applied to a specific area. In forensic science, this type of pattern can align with what specialists describe as a pressure chokehold, a controlled form of compression that affects the neck without leaving widespread external injuries. It is crucial to emphasize that this terminology does not imply a conclusion about intent or identity. Instead, it is a technical framework used by forensic professionals to interpret physical evidence. Pressure-based holds tend to create injuries that are more asymmetric and more concentrated than those caused by accidental impacts or falls. The skin may show small, localized discoloration where the force was applied, often on just one side of the neck. This matches what investigators observed: mark that was limited in area, but consistent with a directional, focused compression. Because the injury was small, some might assume it was insignificant. However, forensic examiners are trained to recognize that minor external signs can correspond to major physiological effects, particularly in the neck region where sensitive structures are located. This is why the medical examiner and FBI placed significant weight on the finding. Small marks can be highly informative when reconstructing the sequence of events, especially in a closed environment like cabin 9481, where only 2 individuals were present. By analyzing the injury with scientific caution, investigators aim to avoid speculation and rely on measurable evidence. This approach teaches an important principle in forensic work: the size of an injury does not determine its importance, its pattern does. Understanding these distinctions helps ensure that every case is examined with accuracy, fairness, and respect for the truth. In forensic and medical analysis, one of the most frequently examined questions is how quickly a person can lose consciousness when pressure is applied to the neck area. Experts emphasize that the time frame often cited, 8 to 12 seconds, is not a fixed rule, but an estimate based on how blood flow to the brain can be temporarily disrupted. This information is used in investigations not to describe or teach a technique, but to understand whether a particular scenario is medically plausible. When external pressure affects the major vessels in the neck, the brain can experience a rapid decrease in oxygenated blood. If this flow is sufficiently reduced, loss of consciousness may occur within seconds. The exact timing varies depending on individual health, physical position, and the nature of the pressure. Importantly, investigators use this knowledge to assess whether the physical markings on a person are consistent with a brief, concentrated compression or with a longer, sustained event. Understanding this physiological window helps forensic teams reconstruct timelines. For instance, if markings appear localized and in focused pressure, investigators can determine whether the observed injuries match the medically known timeframe for impaired consciousness. This process reinforces the importance of scientific reasoning, careful evidence review, and avoiding assumptions, ensuring each conclusion is grounded in verified medical principles rather than speculation. One question forensic specialists examined in Anna's case was the absence of visible defensive marks, specifically, the lack of scratching or clawing on the neck area. In many situations, when pressure is applied from the front, a person may instinctively reach upward in an attempt to relieve the pressure, which can leave noticeable marks on both the neck and the hands. However, when compression occurs from behind, the remains' natural defensive responses can be very different. In a rear position scenario, the arms may be restricted, the angle of movement is limited, and the individual may not have enough leverage to reach the source of pressure. This means the hands cannot easily make contact with the neck, resulting in fewer or no visible scratch marks. Additionally, medical literature notes that if consciousness is impaired within a short window, sometimes just several seconds, the opportunity for defensive reactions can be significantly reduced. Investigators consider these physiological factors carefully. Instead of assuming a struggle did or did not occur, they compare the physical evidence with known behavioral and anatomical responses. The absence of scratching does not prove or disprove any particular scenario. It simply guides investigators toward understanding which positions or mechanisms are most consistent with the observed injuries. This ensures the analysis remains grounded in science and avoids speculation. When first responders described Anna as being in perfect condition except for being dead, the phrase carried a significant forensic implication. It suggested that there were no major external injuries, no signs of a severe fall, physical impact, or prolonged struggle. In other words, her outward appearance did not match what one might expect from many accidental causes of death. This observation typically leads investigators to consider mechanisms that affect internal physiology rather than visible bodily harm. One of the possibilities consistent with this description is a form of loss of life caused by interrupted airflow or circulation, because such events can occur with minimal external trauma. In many cases of this nature, the skin and body may appear largely intact, with only small or localized marks, such as the subtle neck bruise noted by investigators. The absence of widespread injury suggests that the event was brief, targeted, and involved controlled pressure rather than chaotic physical force. This does not determine intent or identify any individual. Instead, it helps forensic teams narrow down the types of medical mechanisms that could lead to such an outcome. The observation highlights an important investigative principle. Sometimes, the lack of visible injury can be as revealing as the presence of it, guiding experts toward understanding what happened physiologically and ruling out causes that rely on major external trauma. Data recorded. One of the most important elements in understanding what happened inside cabin 9481 is the hallway camera on Deck 9. Cruise ships rely heavily on surveillance systems to ensure passenger safety, and the camera positioned directly outside the cabin played a central role in this investigation. It continuously recorded movement in the corridor, capturing every person who walked past, approached, or entered the surrounding rooms. Because cabin 9481 has only a single entrance, the hallway camera becomes the primary tool for confirming who had access to the space during the critical overnight timeline. According to investigators, the footage showed a complete record of individuals entering and exiting the area. Only 2 people were captured entering cabin 9481 on the night of November 6, Anna and her stepbrother. No third person was seen approaching the door, and no unfamiliar figure entered between 22:00 and the discovery the next morning at 11:17. This is a key point because it effectively rules out the possibility of an unknown individual entering the cabin unnoticed. The camera's angle covers the full width of the hallway, making it extremely difficult for anyone to bypass its field of view. The footage also revealed when the stepbrother left the cabin, one of the few movements recorded from that room during the night. His exit becomes an important timestamp that investigators use to reconstruct the final hours. Meanwhile, the absence of Anna on camera after 2200 supports the conclusion that she never re-entered the hallway, reinforcing the idea that the incident took place entirely inside the cabin. The reliability of the Deck 9 camera demonstrates how modern investigations depend not only on physical evidence, but also on digital reconstruction. By analyzing who was present, who was absent, and when movement occurred, investigators can establish a clear, objective framework. This helps ensure the case is examined with accuracy, transparency, and respect for factual integrity, avoiding speculation and grounding conclusions in verifiable documentation. When investigators reviewed the Deck 9 hallway footage, one detail became central to the reconstruction of events throughout the entire night. The only person recorded entering or exiting cabin 91 besides Anna was her stepbrother, identified as TH. No third party appeared in the footage, no unknown figure approached the door, and there were no unexplained movements in the surrounding corridor. This allowed investigators to rule out the possibility of an outside intruder and establish the cabin as a closed environment with a strictly limited set of occupants. The camera documented Anna entering the cabin earlier in the evening, after which she was never seen exiting again. In contrast, TH was captured leaving the room within the investigative timeframe, creating a crucial timestamp that helps narrow down the sequence of events inside the cabin. While the footage does not reveal what occurred behind closed doors, it provides an objective framework. Only 2 individuals were documented inside during the critical hours, and only one of them appears on camera after the timeline began. This does not serve as proof of wrongdoing, rather, it is the kind of factual evasion investigators rely on to build an accurate timeline. The absence of additional people simplifies the scope of the investigation, but also places greater importance on understanding the interactions between the 2 individuals inside. Investigators must cross-reference the footage with statements, cabin entry logs, and physical evidence to determine whether the timeline is consistent or whether gaps require further clarification. The situation highlights an important educational point about forensic work. Surveillance footage is not used to assign guilt but to establish context. It helps eliminate unsupported theories, reduce speculation, and focus attention on verifiable facts. By understanding who was presenters can pursue a clearer, more transparent search for truth, one grounded in documentation rather than assumption. A significant element of the investigation into cabin 9481 was the confirmation that no third person entered or exited the space during the overnight hours. The hallway camera on Deck 9, positioned directly across from the cabin door, provided a continuous and unobstructed view of the corridor. Importantly, investigators clarified that the camera had no blind spot near the entrance of the cabin, meaning no one could approach, enter, or leave without being recorded. This setup effectively eliminates the possibility that an unknown individual accessed the room unnoticed. The footage shows only 2 people associated with the cabin during the critical time frame: Anna, who entered earlier in the evening and was not seen again, and her stepbrother, who appeared on camera departing the room at a documented hour. The absence of any additional figures strengthens the classification of the cabin as a closed environment, where all relevant actions must be understood within the interactions of the 2 confirmed occupants. This finding is crucial from an investigative standpoint because it allows authorities to rule out external interference. Without a blind spot, there is no scenario in which someone could slip past the doorway undetected. The reliability of the camera system enables investigators to focus their efforts on timeline reconstruction, behavioral analysis, and physical evidence rather than pursuing hypothetical possibilities that lack support. Educating viewers about this process is essential. Surveillance footage is not about assigning blame, it is about establishing factual boundaries. By confirming who was present and who was not, investigators can avoid speculation and base their conclusions on verifiable data. Understanding the absence of blind spots helps demonstrate how modern forensic work relies on precise documentation to uncover the truthfulness, accuracy, and transparency. A critical aspect of the investigation involved analyzing the timestamp from 100 to 1100 to reconstruct the timeline of events inside cabin 9481. The footage from the hallway camera provided key information about when individuals entered and exited the cabin, as well as any potential irregularities in the recorded movements. Between 100 and 0600, there was little recorded activity, The camera footage showed no further movement in or out of the cabin after the last confirmed entry at 22:00. This gap raised important questions for investigators. If Anna had been in the cabin, why was she not seen exiting or interacting with anyone? The absence of her movements suggested that something might have happened between the hours when the cabin was undisturbed. At 07:30, family members began looking for Anna, noticing her absence from the room, but no signs of disturbance were observed. By 1100, housekeeping staff arrived for routine service, entering the cabin as part of their daily duties. The most critical timestamp, 11:17, marked the discovery of Anna's unresponsive state beneath the bed. This discovery initiated the shift in the investigation, triggering the involvement of security and authorities. By analyzing these timestamps, investigators were able to focus their attention on the period from 100 to 1100, a time frame with few movements recorded on camera, except for Th. The stepbrother leaving the cabin. Understanding the flow of time and recorded actions allowed investigators to focus on who was in the cabin, when they were there, and what could have occurred during those hours. This process illustrates how meticulous analysis of timestamps can provide clarity, reduce speculation, and guide a fair, fact-based investigation. As part of the ongoing investigation, the FBI seized footage from 8 cameras surrounding the area of interest, significantly enhancing the scope of the inquiry. This collection of data is powerful because it provides a comprehensive view of the surrounding environment, covering various angles and times. Surveillance cameras on board the ship were strategically placed in key locations, including hallways, common areas, and entrances to cabins, allowing investigators to track movements and activities both inside and around cabin 9481. The ability to access these recordings provides an objective record of events that happened before and after key incidents, allowing investigators to piece together a detailed timeline. The value of such data lies in its ability to confirm or challenge witness statements, create links between events, and rule out possible scenarios. For example, if an individual was seen in the vicinity of cabin 9481 at an unusual time, the camera footage could establish whether their presence was connected to the timeline being investigated. Additionally, the presence of multiple cameras ensures that there is no single blind spot, further increasing the reliability of the data. The thoroughness of this footage offers a high level of clarity in situations where there are limited direct witnesses or unclear events. It provides investigators with objective evidence that is free from interpretation bias, making it an essential tool in eliminating speculation and strengthening the investigation's foundation. By relying on verified, multi-angle camera data, the FBI can establish a solid, fact-based narrative to guide the investigation forward, ensuring fairness and accuracy. The camera footage in this case transformed the investigation into what can be described as a locked room mystery at sea. This is because the surveillance data provided investigators with an unbroken, objective record of all movements within the critical time frame surrounding the incident. The cameras around the ship, including the hallway surveillance on Deck 9, were instrumental in showing exactly who entered and exited cabin 9481, as well as who had access to the immediate vicinity of the cabin. In essence, the cameras ensured that the scene was thoroughly documented, leaving no room for unknown individuals to enter or exit the space unnoticed. This comprehensive coverage makes the case stand out as a closed environment, where the actions of the 2 confirmed individuals inside the cabin, Anna and her stepbrother, are at the center of the investigation. The absence of any third party, as confirmed by the camera footage, helps investigators rule out the possibility of external interference. It means that the entire event, from the moments leading up to interactions to the discovery of her remains, took place within the confines of that one small, documented space. The significance of this is twofold. First, it provides critical certainty. Investigators can now focus exclusively on what occurred within this sealed environment. Second, it simplifies the search for truth, as the timeline is far more reliable and straightforward, based on clear visual evidence. This makes the investigation less susceptible to speculation and more focused on reconstructing events on objective, factual data. The camera footage essentially locked down the scene, offering a powerful tool for uncovering the truth. Important witness. The FaceTime call at 3:00 a.m. with Anna's boyfriend became a pivotal moment in the investigation, as it raised questions regarding the nature of the interactions in cabin 9481 that night. During the call, Anna's boyfriend reportedly saw her stepbrother, climbing onto her in a way that seemed inappropriate. This moment was recorded during a time when Anna was seemingly alone in her cabin, and the incident was witnessed through the phone screen. Given that the boyfriend was able to observe the situation in real time, it introduces the possibility of a conflict or inappropriate behavior occurring between the two individuals. For investigators, this video call becomes a crucial timestamp in understanding the dynamics at play in the cabin during the early hours of the morning. The question then becomes, what prompted to act in such a way, and how did Anna respond? It's essential to consider how a victim might react in a stressful or uncomfortable situation. Psychologically, Anna could have been confused, frightened, or physically constrained, particularly if she was startled by her stepbrother's behavior during what should have been a normal, private moment. The fact that she appeared on the call suggests she might not have been incapacitated, but her emotional state could still have been impacted by the incident. In any situation where boundaries are crossed, especially between family members, there can be a range of psychological responses, from shock and disbelief to fear and confusion. It's possible that Anna's mental state during the call was one of uncertainty, unsure of how to react to her stepbrother's actions, which might have been perceived as a violation of trust or personal space. Victims in such situations often experience paralysis by indecision, where they do not immediately know how to react or whether to voice their discomfort, especially when they are not physically in control of the situation. Given the complexity of these interactions, investigators must approach the behavior of both parties with sensitivity, exploring how both the relationship dynamics and the psychological impact of the situation might have influenced their actions. This also includes examining the witnessed behavior from the boyfriend's perspective, as his statement can help clarify the context and seriousness of the events. Ultimately, this timestamp highlights the importance of understanding psychological and behavioral responses during high-stress moments and ensures that every piece of evidence is considered in the broader investigation. When Anna's stepbrother, reportedly said, "I don't remember what happened," this statement immediately captured the attention of forensic psychologists involved in the investigation. Memory gaps, particularly in high-stress situations, can be indicative of a range of psychological factors that are critical to understanding human behavior under duress. In forensic psychology, this kind of response is often linked to trauma-induced memory impairment or dissociative states, where an individual may experience a temporary inability to recall events due to extreme emotional or psychological stress. Dissociation is a psychological defense mechanism that occurs when a person's mind disconnects from distressing emotions or overwhelming situations. In case, the inability to recall events may suggest that the situation was so emotionally intense that his mind blocked out the memory as a way to protect itself from the trauma. This could be an unconscious coping mechanism, where the individual is unable to process or recall disturbing events in their entirety. It's important to recognize that the brain may sometimes block out memories of highly traumatic moments, not necessarily because the person is intentionally trying to hide the truth, but as a form of psychological self-defense. Additionally, the term emotional mess, when was being questioned by the FBI, provides another important clue. In forensic psychology, emotional dysregulation, such as crying, panic, or incoherence, can be a sign of acute stress or overwhelming anxiety. These signs indicate that the individual is experiencing extreme emotional distress, which can often occur when someone is caught in a stressful situation or facing guilt, fear, or confusion. Emotional dysregulation can impair one's ability to think clearly and articulate thoughts, which could explain disorganized responses during questioning. Forensic psychologists would likely consider the psychological impact of the situation when evaluating behavior. The emotional turmoil he displayed, coupled with his apparent memory lapse, suggests that he may have been under significant psychological stress during the events leading up to the incident and during the questioning by authorities. It's crucial to approach such responses with a careful understanding of the complexities of human psychology, recognizing that emotional and cognitive reactions under stress are not always straightforward and can provide valuable insights into the person's state of mind during critical moments. The statement, "He had demons in his past," made by a family member, offers crucial insight into the psychological history of Th, Anna's stepbrother, and suggests that his past may have been fraught with unresolved issues that could have impacted his behavior. In forensic psychology, references to demons often allude to past trauma, mental health struggles, or unaddressed emotional distress. These struggles might include anything from childhood abuse, attachment issues, or past criminal behavior, factors that contribute to a person's emotional and psychological development. Such unresolved issues can shape an individual's reactions and coping mechanisms, especially under stress. The family's mention of his past could indicate a history of psychological vulnerability or behavioral instability, which may have played a role in his actions leading up to the incident. In forensic investigations, understanding an individual's psychopast is crucial because past trauma or emotional disturbances often manifest in complex behaviors when a person is under duress. For example, individuals with a history of anger management issues or impulsivity may react in a manner that seems disproportionate to the situation. These emotional responses, when combined with stressful situations, may contribute to dissociation or a temporary lack of clear recall. As indicated by Th's statement, "I don't remember what happened." The psychological defense mechanisms that develop from past trauma cause someone to block out distressing memories in order to cope with overwhelming emotions. When it comes to analyzing the post-incident behavior, such as hiding the remains under the bed, forensic psychologists examine the motivations behind such actions. Concealing a remains can fit in the context of guilt, fear of consequences, and self-preservation. In some cases, this action may reflect cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort caused when one's actions contradict their values or self-image. For Th, if he was experiencing guilt or denial, placing Anna in a hidden location could have been an attempt to distance himself from the reality of his actions, making it easier for him to avoid confronting the truth. Additionally, the psychological defense mechanisms at play are important to consider. Hiding the remains could be a manifestation of a desire to control the situation. It may also reflect a state of panic or confusion in the immediate aftermath of the incident. People in high-stress situations often act impulsively or out of a deep sense of shock, not necessarily with premeditated malice, but driven by a need to mitigate the consequences of their actions. The act of concealment could also stem from a fear of punishment or public shaming. For Th, who was already dealing with personal demons, the weight of being caught in such an extreme act might have felt unbearable. Hiding the remains, in this sense, could be viewed as an attempt to avoid facing the consequences of his actions, even if temporarily. From a forensic psychology perspective, this action reflects an attempt to cope with overwhelming emotions, guilt, fear, confusion, and may suggest avoidance coping behavior, which is often seen in individuals who feel they cannot confront or deal with the consequences of their actions. Understanding these psychological dynamics provides crucial insight into the behavior exhibited by Th, and how his past emotional struggles, combined with the stress of the situation, may have influenced his decisions. It also emphasizes the importance of evaluating behavioral patterns, not only in the context of a single event, but also through the lens of an individual's broader psychological and emotional history. In this way, forensic psychology plays a vital role in helping investigators understand why a person might act in a certain way, and how past experiences contribute to present actions. Contradicting picture. On November 21, a pivotal moment in the investigation occurred during a divorce hearing, where Th was officially named a suspect in the case. This development marked a significant shift in the investigation, as the legal proceedings brought greater public attention to his involvement in the events surrounding Anna's death. Prior to this hearing, there had been speculation about Th's role, but the formal identification of him as a suspect signaled that authorities were increasingly focusing on him as a key figure in the case. The legal proceedings also opened up discussions about his relationships with family members, past behaviors, and potential motives. Investigators were now able to delve deeper into his background, uncovering potential psychological or behavioral patterns that might explain his actions. However, just as the case was gaining traction, a gag order was issued by Th's stepmother, which effectively sealed all court records related to the case. The gag order prohibited further disclosure of details, restricting the flow of information to the public. This action was seen as an attempt to control the narrative and prevent further media attention on sensitive aspects of the case. It also raised concerns about transparency and the fairness of the investigation, as the gag order limited the ability of the public and media to stay informed about the legal developments. The decision to issue a gag order is not uncommon in high-profile cases where sensitive information is involved, especially when there are ongoing investigations. However, it does create challenges for investigators and the public, who rely on open access to records to understand the progress of the case and ensure accountability. The gag order meant that much of the legal process, including the details about the evidence and witness testimonies, was kept under wraps, raising the question of whether there was a deliberate attempt to shield critical information from public scrutiny. In forensic investigations, the use of gag orders can complicate the process of gathering public support and witness statements. While it is important to respect legal processes and privacy, it also emphasizes the delicate balance between ensuring fair proceedings and maintaining public trust. The gag order, while legally enforceable, further deepened the mystery surrounding the case and prompted many to ask, what is being concealed and why? This turn of events highlighted the tensions between public access to information and the protection of legal rights, creating a complicated layer in the ongoing investigation. The revelation that Anna's biological mother first learned of her daughter's death through Google is a significant and troubling detail in the investigation. This suggests a lack of communication or deliberate concealment of information from those closest to Anna, particularly regarding the circumstances leading to her death. For a parent to be left unaware of such a critical event until they read about it online raises questions about the family dynamics and the role of certain individuals in withholding crucial information. It may indicate that some members of the family were either shielding her from the painful truth or were actively engaged in keeping vital details hidden. In forensic psychology, the discovery of this information could point to emotional manipulation, denial, or even intention to avoid responsibility on the part of those who knew more. The mother's reaction, learning about the tragic loss of her daughter in such an impersonal manner, also speaks to the psychological impact this would have on her, potentially heightening feelings of betrayal or anger. It's important to recognize that emotional suppression or deliberate omission of facts can have deep psychological consequences, not just for the victim but for the family members who are kept in the dark. Meanwhile, the complete silence from the biological father adds another layer of complexity to the situation. His decision to remain quiet, despite such a tragic event involving his child, could suggest a reluctance to get involved or a possible detachment from the family situation. In some cases, silence can also be a sign of guilt, fear of legal repercussions, or even emotional numbness in response to overwhelming grief or shame. His refusal to speak out at this crucial moment raises important questions about his relationship with Anna, and whether his silence is rooted in personal reasons, fear, or a desire to avoid any public scrutiny. Together, these elements of non-disclosure and silence highlight a broader issue in the investigation: how information is controlled or withheld, and what this reveals about the psychological and emotional dynamics within the family. Understanding these behaviors is crucial for investigators, as it can offer insight into motive, family tensions, and potential attempts to cover up details that could complicate the search for the truth. The gaps in communication between family members provide investigators with a more complex puzzle, where actions or inactions can speak volumes about the underlying relationships and potential involvement of those closest to the case. Throughout the investigation, inconsistencies in the testimonies have raised crucial questions that need to be addressed to piece together a coherent timeline of Anna's final hours. One of the most glaring contradictions comes from the statement, "Anna was tired," which suggests she was unwell or fatigued, yet she was later seen down at the casino. If Anna had been too tired to continue with her activities, why would she have gone to a lively, bustling area like the casino? This inconsistency in the narrative points to the possibility of misleading or incomplete information, which investigators must carefully examine. Did Anna really feel unwell, or was there something else that prompted her to go out after being described as tired? The discrepancy in what was reported about her physical state could indicate that there were details being left out, either unintentionally or intentionally, that might shed light on what really happened. Equally troubling is the question of who was the last person to see Anna conscious and aware. Witnesses have offered conflicting accounts, and establishing the last confirmed interaction with Anna before she was found unresponsive could provide critical insight into the events leading up to her death. Identifying this individual is essential for investigators, as it may help explain Anna's behavior in the hours preceding her discovery. Was she with someone who could clarify her emotional or physical state at that time, or was her last interaction with someone whose account is now in question? The failure to answer this question leaves a significant gap in the timeline, making it more challenging to determine if foul play was involved, or if the situation unfolded in a different way. Adding to the complexity of the investigation is the Carnival Cruise Line's decision to withhold all CCTV footage from the public. The cruise line's actions in keeping the CCTV data secure raise concerns about transparency and the fairness of the investigation. While it is not uncommon for companies to limit access to such material during an ongoing investigation, the decision not to release the footage to the public or the media has created an atmosphere of uncertainty. If the CCTV footage could provide visual evidence of Anna's movements or interactions during the crucial hours, withholding it complicates the search for the truth. The importance of the CCTV data cannot be overstated. Surveillance footage from the ship's cameras could potentially confirm who was with Anna, where she was, and what she was doing in the hours leading up to the discovery of her remains. It could also show whether she was interacting with anyone who might have contributed to her condition, or if there were unusual movements around her cabin that could help explain what happened. By withholding this footage, Carnival Cruise Line has made it more difficult for investigators to publicly confirm facts, leading some to question whether the cruise line is trying to avoid scrutiny or simply protecting the privacy of those involved. The combination of contradictory testimonies, missing last witness accounts, and the withholding of key evidence presents a significant challenge for investigators and the public alike. As the investigation unfolds, it will be crucial for all involved parties to ensure transparency and accountability. Only with access to all available information can the true circumstances of Anna's death be revealed. The inconsistencies in the timeline and the control over vital evidence highlight the complexities of this case and underscore the importance of pursuing every lead with care, thoroughness, and respect for the truth. The FBI's absolute silence in the face of growing public interest and media scrutiny has raised several questions, particularly regarding the identity of the suspect. Some speculate that the reason behind this withholding of information is the fact that the suspect is a minor. In many cases involving juvenile suspects, law enforcement agencies are legally restricted from releasing certain details, especially regarding the suspect's identity, to protect their rights and prevent undue harm to their future. In this case, the FBI may be abiding by these protocols, which ensure that minors are not subjected to the same level of public exposure as adults. While this decision is consistent with protecting the rights of the accused, it has led to frustration and confusion among the public as they seek clarity on the investigation's progress. Another layer of complexity in this case lies in the family dynamics and the arrangement of the cabin on the Carnival cruise. The cabin, which housed 3 teenagers of different genders, adds a unique challenge to understanding the interactions that might have taken place. With multiple teenagers in a confined space, there are many potential emotional and psychological factors to consider. The dynamics between siblings or step-siblings, especially in a non-parental setting like a cruise, can vary greatly. Teenagers in close quarters, with different backgrounds and family relationships, may exhibit behaviors that are difficult to interpret, especially under stress. The arrangement of 3 teenagers in the cabin raises concerns about the boundaries of privacy, personal space, and the potential for conflict. Given that the 3 teenagers were not in a traditional family structure, but rather in a step-sibling dynamic, this complexity adds a layer of uncertainty. Were there underlying tensions between the individuals, or were personal boundaries crossed in ways that may not have been immediately obvious to others? The situation calls for careful investigation into their relationships, how they interacted with each other before and during the cruise, and whether any unresolved issues contributed to the tragedy. Investigators must take into account not just the physical evidence, but also the psychological dynamics between the individuals involved. This is especially important when minors are involved, as their emotional responses and interactions may differ greatly from those of adults. Understanding the family structure, relationships, and emotional states of the teenagers in the cabin can provide key insights into the circumstances that led to the tragic event. By analyzing these dynamics alongside other investigative findings, authorities can work to piece together the full story, while ensuring fairness and respect for the legal protections afforded to minors. The media narrative surrounding the case has largely been shaped by the family's internal control over the information that has been made public. The family's choice to limit or manage the release of details has led to significant gaps in the broader understanding of the case. By restricting media access or issuing public statements selectively, they have maintained a level of control over how the story is perceived, both by the public and by investigative bodies. This approach may be a strategic decision aimed at managing the emotional and legal complexities of the situation, particularly given the involvement of minors. When family members take such steps, it can result in limited transparency, making it difficult for the public to form a complete picture of the events. While families have the right to protect their privacy, this control over the narrative can also obscure key details that might help law enforcement and the public understand the true nature of the events. From a media perspective, this creates a challenging environment where speculation may fill the gaps left by the family's silence or selective communication. For investigators, it requires careful navigation to ensure that the pursuit of truth isn't hindered by the lack of comprehensive information. The contrast of three worlds. In the investigation, the physical evidence has proven to be the most reliable source of information, as it cannot lie. The discovery of Anna's remains hidden beneath the bed suggests an attempt to conceal the truth, indicating that someone was trying to hide what had happened. The chokehold bruise, found in the precise area of the neck, provides crucial information about the manner in which force was applied, strongly suggesting the cause of death was due to compression of the airway, which caused asphyxiation. This is a specific and localized injury, lending further weight to the theory that this was a deliberate act rather than an accident. The absence of any third party in the cabin, confirmed by the camera footage and statements, further solidifies the scenario as a closed environment. The cabin, with only 2 known occupants, essentially became a locked room where all activities and interactions occurred under a limited scope. This significantly narrows down the investigation and eliminates the possibility of external involvement. Furthermore, the lack of signs of an accident indicates that Anna's death was not the result of a fall, injury, or other accidental causes. The combination of these physical findings points to a deliberate, controlled action. Investigators now focus on reconstructing the timeline and understanding the events leading up to this moment, knowing that the evidence cannot be refuted. The family narrative surrounding Anna's death is filled with gaps and inconsistencies that raise important questions. For instance, no one in the family mentioned the concealment of the remains beneath the bed, despite the fact that this is a significant piece of evidence. The family's description of Anna as being in perfect condition contrasts sharply with the presence of a bruise on her neck. This contradiction suggests either a lack of awareness or a deliberate omission, as the bruise is critical to understanding the cause of death. There are also conflicting accounts from various family members, including her grandparents, stepmother, and biological father. These inconsistencies complicate the investigation, as it is unclear whether these differences reflect differing perceptions of events or whether they indicate a purposeful attempt to mislead. The claim of a close-knit family also seems at odds with the evidence. If the family truly shared a strong bond, why would there be such discrepancies in their accounts? Why was the discovery of the remains not discussed openly, and why did certain details seem to be selectively withheld? These gaps and contradictions in the family's narrative are critical to the investigation. Investigators must consider these inconsistencies as potential indicators of either confusion, emotional distress, or a more deliberate attempt to obscure the truth. The FBI's analysis of the case focuses on 3 key pillars: means, opportunity, and behavior after. The first, means, ability to cough. The physical evidence of the chokehold bruise on Anna's neck indicates that the means of death involved deliberate compression of the airway, suggesting the suspect had the ability to cause death through controlled physical force. The second, Opportunity, exclusive presence in the room. The fact that only 2 people were present in the cabin, with no third party documented by surveillance, limits the opportunity for any external involvement. This suggests that any fatal action could only have been carried out by the 2 known occupants. The last. Behavior after concealment of the remains. The act of hiding the remains beneath the bed points to post-event behavior that could indicate panic, unintentional consequences, or an attempt to avoid responsibility. This reaction suggests emotional discomfort and possible fear of detection. These 3 pillars guide the FBI's investigation, helping them focus on physical evidence and behavioral patterns rather than emotional reactions. The collision of 3 worlds, physical evidence, family testimonies, and legal proceedings, has exposed several systemic gaps in the investigation that raise serious concerns. One of the most glaring issues is the time gap between 311 and 17, where there is a complete lack of information about Anna's whereabouts. The family did not report her missing during these crucial hours, and no one appears to have actively searched for her. The fact that no alarm was raised for nearly 8 hours suggests either an emotional disconnect or an attempt to cover up the truth. Additionally, the concealment of the remains beneath the bed, instead of immediately notifying authorities, is a significant red flag. This act points to possibility of deliberate intent to hide evidence, whether from guilt, panic, or fear of repercussions. In forensic psychology, the post-event behavior of hiding the remains is often linked to emotional distress and a desire to avoid responsibility, potentially indicating a loss of control or overwhelming fear of the consequences. There is also a mismatch between the camera log and the testimonies. Surveillance footage shows limited movement, but family accounts of the events differ significantly from what the camera captured, revealing a lack of synchronization between the 2. This discrepancy raises questions about the accuracy of the family's statements and whether they are attempting to downplay or obscure critical details. Finally, the immediate issuance of a gag order by the family has further complicated matters. By restricting access to vital information, the gag order limits the transparency needed for a full public understanding of the case. This action has created a veil of secrecy, raising suspicions that there may be more information being withheld. The timing of this gag order, immediately after the family became involved in the investigation, also suggests an attempt to control the narrative and limit the flow of information that could negatively impact certain parties. These systemic gaps highlight the need for a thorough, transparent investigation. Without clear answers to these fundamental questions, the public and authorities are left to grapple with contradictions that only deepen the mystery surrounding Anna's death. Each gap in the timeline, each piece of withheld information, only strengthens the urgency to uncover the truth. The FBI is currently considering 3 possible investigative scenarios, each of which explores different aspects of the juvenile homicide model without making any direct accusations. These scenarios offer potential explanations for the events leading up to Anna's death, each grounded in psychological and behavioral analysis. The first, conflict leading to chokehold. One possibility is that a conflict Anna and her stepbrother escalated, resulting in a chokehold. This could have been a loss of control during an emotional outburst, potentially leading to unintentional death. In this scenario, the immediate panic afterward might have prompted him to hide the remains instead of seeking help, driven by overwhelming fear of the consequences and a desire to avoid responsibility. The second, inappropriate behavior leading to resistance. Another theory suggests that inappropriate behavior, possibly of a sexual or emotional nature, might have led to Anna resisting. If TH attempted to overpower her or silence her, this could have escalated into a situation where the chokehold was used to control the victim. If Anna fought back, TH may have reacted impulsively to prevent her from making noise or alerting others. In this case, the act of hiding the remains afterward would align with fear of being caught and the psychological need to conceal evidence. The last, accidental death during a struggle. Lastly, the FBI is considering the possibility that the death occurred during an accidental struggle. In this scenario, Anna may have been involved in a physical altercation with her stepbrother, which escalated unexpectedly. The panic following the incident could have led to hiding the remains as a desperate attempt to cover up the accident, further complicated by the emotional turmoil of dealing with the situation. Each of these scenarios reflects potential reactions of a suspect under stress, highlighting the importance of psychological analysis to understand the context and motivations behind the actions. The reason this case has become a national focal point is not necessarily because of the question of who killed Anna, but rather the broader issue of control over what information is allowed to be released. While the facts surrounding Anna's death are still under investigation, what has captured the public's attention is the control over information and the withholding of critical details that could shed light on the truth. The family, the media, and even law enforcement have all been involved in the complex dynamics of managing the flow of information, leaving the public to speculate and piece together the story from what little has been shared. The gag order, the conflicting family testimonies, and the restricted access to crucial surveillance footage have all created a situation where the truth is obscured, making the investigation less about the facts and more about who holds the keys to the narrative. This has led to increasing questions about transparency and accountability, with many feeling that the story cannot be fully understood until all the facts are made available. 2 people entered the cabin. One never walked out again. The other says they don't remember. And until the truth is unlocked, we can only follow the trail left by the cameras. All persons are presumed innocent until proven guilty. This case serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities of justice and the importance of public access to information in ensuring fairness in investigations. The pursuit of truth cannot be silenced or controlled. It must be open, transparent, and free from manipulation.